More than 50 years ago, C.S. Lewis wrote, "It's all love or sex these days. Friendship is almost as quaint and outdated a notion as chastity. Soon friends will be like the elves and the pixies, fabulous mythical creatures from a distant past." Do you think his prediction has come to pass? If so, why do you think that has happened?
I was just reflecting about how in our electronic age, I'm not a Facebook user, but maybe some of you are, and so a friend in Facebook is pretty superficial in that sense, but so I guess electronically we're less in touch.
During an earlier portion of my adult life, when I was even younger than I am today, I had a fairly careless attitude toward friendship. I had many acquaintances and even a few friends, all without any real effort on my part, and I was happy. Now and then, though, I would hear people talk about friendships that were self-sacrificing. I heard about friendships that lasted a lifetime. I heard talk of friends confessing their weaknesses or sins to each other and holding each other accountable. The Bible even speaks of laying down one's life for friends. For some reason, this was a level of friendship which never seemed to find me. As I've gotten older, I've learned the value of close friendships and have given a great deal of thought to what it takes to have a close friend and to be one, and why that sort of friendship never seemed to find me. I began to study what the Bible has to say about friendships. I learned that many books and articles have been written and sermons preached about discipleship, and a good number about building Christian community, but relatively few about building deep, intimate, lasting friendships. Yet friendship is the foundation upon which both discipleship and community are built. I began working to deepen the friendships I had and looking for opportunities to forge new ones. I should have mentioned before starting, as we get into this, there's going to be a lot of Bible references. We're not going to probably have time to read them all here today. And so what I would encourage you to do, two things. This is recorded like it is every week, and I have asked the guys in back to zoom in on the screen instead of the front of the church, so that if you go back and look at the video, you'll be able to see the references. Otherwise, I'll try and go slow enough that you can jot them down if you want to look them up later, or feel free to take pictures of the screen on your phone and capture them that way. One book I've read is The Pursuit of God in the Company of Friends by Richard Lamb. It was this book which pointed out to me the concentric circles of Jesus' relationships during his ministry on earth. Let's read Mark 7-17 while considering the following diagram from this book. Is there somebody that's willing to do that? Read Mark 7-17. As you listen to this passage, consider this diagram, and you'll see how the author starts at a very high-level, broad view of all those who came in contact with Christ, and then keeps zooming in to a deeper and deeper and deeper level until he gets down to the three. Go ahead and read for us.
Jesus withdrew his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan and around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him, to keep the people from crowding him, for he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the evil spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell who he was. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designating them apostles, that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges.
Just say it with confidence. None of us know either.
Which means sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him.
So we see Christ having different levels of association, and I think we all, if you think about it, the people in your life, I think that you probably have similar concentric circles, with the exception of maybe the crowd. That outer circle is probably limited to people that have some degree of celebrity, and I think Christ had that by this point where this was written. I think our circles may look more like this: contacts, acquaintances, friends, and intimate friends. And I've, I guess, defined those this way. Contacts would be the people you have crossed paths with, you're introduced, you may know each other by name. Acquaintances, the next circle in, are people you know something about, and they know something about you. You may have something in common. An example would probably be, for most of us, many of the people we attend church with. Might be like the 72 that Jesus sent out in Luke 10. He knew something about them. He knew them well enough to choose them as the people to go forth and make ready different geographic areas for his ministry. But he didn't, I don't think, know them as well as the 12. Friends would be the next circle in. These would be people you like and enjoy being with. You know more about each other than acquaintances and probably have some common interests. This might be more similar in our world to the level of intimacy that would develop in a small group at church. Perhaps this would be similar to the relationship Jesus had with his disciples. In John 15:15, he told them, "I no longer call you servants, because servants do not know the master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you." While these first three levels of friendship come easily for many, most of what God has to say in Scripture about friendship is about levels much closer to the inner circle. It is that inner circle that we will be spending the rest of this class discussing. When the Bible mentions friendship, it is almost always this intimate inner circle level of friendship. We read about friends who stick closer than a brother and about willingly bearing each other's burdens. We even read that the greatest love that we can show is laying down our life for our friends. The Bible does not spend much time talking about friendship the way our culture sees it today. When the Bible speaks of friendship, it is speaking of something very close to the inner circle. What do you think are some of the characteristics of biblical friendship? Does anyone have any ideas on that?
I would say trust.
What's that? Larry?
Well, I once did a sermon on this from the book of Proverbs. If you ever get a hold of Derek Kidner's commentary on the Proverbs, he has a section in the beginning of his book on different subjects and one's friends. It's really good. I can't remember any of it, so I have nothing to add there. But one of the things that I have found is, someone said trust. I think safety is a big important part. You know, there was this time when accountability groups were being formed and all this stuff, but there's only a few that are really safe. So Rick Warren was asked, do you believe in accountability groups? He goes, no, because people won't keep it a secret.
Now, this is one of the examples where I said there's a lot of scripture that you can feel free to look up, but we're not going to have time to go through look all these up. But if you want to capture these references and do so on your own, you're certainly welcome to, encouraged to. According to the Bible, the best of friends know each other's soul. Their souls are knitted together. Deuteronomy 13:6 and 1 Samuel 18:1. They are radically loyal, Proverbs 18:24. They make each other better, Proverbs 13:20 and 27:17. They are dependable, Proverbs 17:17, 18:24. They're willing to sacrifice for each other, Ecclesiastes 4:9 and 10, Galatians 6:2. Are willing to speak the truth for each other's good, Proverbs 24:26 and 27:9. And they enjoy each other's company. Psalms 133:1. Let's consider all these aspects of biblical friendship written together into a single description of friendship as described in Scripture. Each of these sentences is based on a specific verse of Scripture. As you hear this description read, consider, do I have any friends who behave this way toward me? How am I doing at treating my friends this way? If much or most of this description is true of a friendship of yours, recognize it as a blessing from God that should not be taken for granted. Our closest friends are people we genuinely enjoy being with. They know our very souls. In fact, it could be said that our souls are connected. They understand us thoroughly. They know what makes us tick, our strengths and our weaknesses. They are trustworthy and do not share with others what is shared with them in confidence. They are unshakable in their loyalty to us. They are honest with us. They are willing to tell us the truth even when it is hard for us to hear. They look for ways to make us better and enjoy doing so. They give of themselves, being willing to invest time, energy, and effort in the friendship, even when it's not easy or convenient for them. They are there to pick us up when we are down or when we need someone to lean on. They willingly take our burdens upon themselves during tough times, at times without even being asked, even though it adds to their own burdens they are also carrying. That is the biblical view of friendship. I'm not suggesting that that's a complete view, but every one of those sentences is based on a scripture. That is a picture of God's intent for friendship for us. Thoughts about any of these aspects of friendship? From a practical standpoint, how can we bear the burden of someone else? We can tackle any or all of these together. Larry's waiting to speak, but the speaker in the video clip we watched said that in God's world there is no wisdom without friendship. Do you agree with that? And if so, why would that be? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to address that first sentence. Quickly forgiving. It's almost automatic. It almost is though you don't care if your friend has done something. That might upset you. For example, when we were leaving, when we came down to interview here, we had best friends. And they said, why didn't you tell us you were going? And I said, well, I didn't know if we were going or not, and I didn't want to upset people in the church and make people think, well, Larry's eager to get out of here. And it hurt them because we were so close. But it was so quickly forgiven, it just didn't matter.
In God's world, there is no wisdom without friendship. Does that make sense to anybody? Why might that be? I think part of it might have to do with the concept of iron sharpening iron. We're going to be getting to that.
I guess I have something to say. If you have a friend, they sometimes see things that you don't, so they can help you.
That would relate to the wisdom. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. Yes.
I was thinking a little bit about what is wisdom, and if it's wisdom that you can just help yourself to make good decisions, that's fine. That's a definition of wisdom, but I also view as wisdom of something that you can share with others, and if you don't have friends to share that wisdom with, how do you really know that you have wisdom if you don't share it with others that you care about? So in that sense, I guess it's better to have friends to allow you to have wisdom.
It has been suggested that few people have more than one or two intimate friends and that many have no such friends at all. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis wrote, regarding close friendship that few value it because so few have experienced it. Intimate friendships rarely develop quickly or by chance. It is unlikely that we will ever just happen to spend enough time with anyone for deep, intimate friendships to develop. On 2 of the first slides, I told a bit of my story and mentioned that for a good portion of my life, deep, intimate friendships never seemed to find me. I used the words find me on purpose. Did that choice of words seem inappropriate to anyone? No? I see some heads shaking. This is shaking. This is nodding. I hope so, because if so, you're way ahead of me. Intimate friendships, that is to say, the inner circle of friendships, are something we need to cultivate, invest in, grow, and develop. It takes time and intent. We need to be willing to invest in the friendships that we most want to see grow. And at times, that may mean investing more than the other person is able to. I was waiting for deep friendship to find me. That's not usually how it works. It worked that way for Jonathan and David, it seems. The part in their story where it talks about their souls being knitted together, that was pretty early in that was at their first meeting, I believe. And I think that's pretty unusual. If we want intimate friendships, we need to invest time and effort and resources into those carefully chosen friendships. We need to be intentional and disciplined in building and maintaining our friendships if we want them to grow deep and intimate and remain so. And yet, in today's busy world, that will likely mean that we intentionally choose to invest more time with some friends by choosing to invest less time with others. How does that strike you? Does that seem appropriate? I may have put something in here just to prod you into commenting. Does it seem okay to have favorites? Larry says yes.
Well, those are the ones you naturally connect with.
Those are the ones you naturally connect with. Consider how Jesus spent time with those around him. John had a special place in Jesus' heart. He was the disciple Jesus loved. He alone among the disciples was at the foot of the cross. He was the one who Jesus entrusted the care of his mother to. Jesus seems also to have been especially close to Peter and James. They, together with John, were the 3 he renamed with nicknames. Jesus invested more of his face time with Peter, James, and John than the rest of the disciples. It was these 3 who Jesus took with him for the raising of Jairus' daughters. Others apparently wanted to accompany him, but according to Mark 5:37, he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. Prior to the transfiguration, Jesus chose 3 disciples to accompany him. Again, it was the inner circle, the 3. Matthew 17:1 tells us that after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. It was these 3 alone who witnessed the transfiguration of Christ. When Jesus was facing the most excruciating day of his life, when he was exceedingly sorrowful and in special need of strength, he chose once again to be with the 3 disciples who he was especially close to. He took his inner circle of friends with him to the Garden of Gethsemane. Mark 14:33 says that he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Jesus was selective about who he got closest to. He was intentional. He chose the 12. In John 15:16, Jesus tells his disciples, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." Luke 6:13 says that when morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them. He didn't allow chance to put that important group together. It wasn't based on a common hobby, who was willing to invest equally in the relationship, or even who he sat next to in church. While we don't know the criteria Jesus used, Scripture does give us some guidance about those we should and should not be closest to. Proverbs 12:26 says that a righteous man is cautious in friendships. Proverbs is loaded with wisdom about those we are to avoid becoming close to. A few examples include those who are gossips, have a hot temper, are disloyal and discontent, are self-indulgent, are immoral, or those who have foolish spiritual beliefs. And there are proverbs listed there to support all of those. In order to build an intimate friendship with someone, or to keep an existing one from drifting apart, we need to regularly invest time and effort into the friendship. There is really no shortcut or substitute for quantity time spent together. We like to talk about quality time. Well, we don't spend much time, but the time we spend is quality time. And I think there's something to be said for quantity time, too. That is why we have to be intentional and selective about who and how many friendships we try to build at once, because each of us only have so much time to invest, and so we need to invest it wisely. Any thoughts on those last several slides? Very quiet group. Everybody tired themselves out at the wedding yesterday.
I was reflecting. I'm not an old timer, but I was thinking about how.
Well, that's kind of relative.
I know, but I kind of view it that for those of us that had a family with young kids, our friends tended to be the parents that were at the same events our kids were at, because we spent time with them, and so you can relate with each other and that kind of stuff. And now, as I'm moving into a different phase where I'm getting closer to an empty nest, I'm kind of looking forward to just hanging out with friends, just because I want to be friends, and it not necessarily centered around my kids so much anymore. So it's I don't know, maybe it's just an interesting life phase thing, perhaps.
But your illustration does sort of support this. It's those you spent time with, certain ones of those at least, you sort of naturally clicked with.
Yeah, it's a both and, because we have best friends that we can't see very often, but we connect by phone or FaceTime or whatever. But I would say that proximity does affect friendships. And I'll give an illustration. So a guy that I knew very well during my college years, we were best buds, and we still remain very close friends. But I had to apologize to him this summer. I said, I'm sorry that I have not, he lives up in Cedarburg, which isn't too far away. But that I hadn't invested as much as I could have into the relationship. And it was just too much space, time, and people. Our lives were just such that we couldn't. But if it would have been a priority, I suppose we would have made it a point more often. And he did say, and that's why then he said in response, he goes, yeah, proximity affects friendships, meaning quantity of time.
Mm-hmm. An example I thought of that sort of supports this: when we get married, we expect to have to invest in building that relationship. When we have children, most realize that those relationships will also require time and investment of resources and energy. Yet in today's fast-paced world, we often go through life with most of our communication through a screen, wondering why there is no depth to our friendships, and thinking that deep friendships should just find us. Those who invest in building friendships will be rewarded, and they will have built the foundation upon which discipleship and community can be built as God intended. As friendships deepen, the aspects of friendship that God desires for us bloom together, not one at a time. For example, we talked about it being God's intent that friends should make each other better. Proverbs 27:7 tells us that as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. What this is trying to say is that if we want our friendship to improve us, we need some friends who can challenge us, and some who are willing to be challenged by us. Only something as hard as iron can sharpen iron, but beyond sharpening iron, what hardens iron so that it can keep its sharp edge longer? The heat of flame in a forge hardens iron. You have to pass through a flame to become stronger. I think it is clear that friends are the iron which sharpens us. But how can we pass successfully through the heat of the forge to keep our sharp edge? We can because the same friends that helped sharpen us bear our burden as we pass through the forge of life's trials. Aspects of friendship bloom together as friendships deepen. I would like to close by sharing a story with you. It's an example of friends whose souls are knitted together like those of Jonathan and David, enough so that they can sense when one of them is hurting without even being told. They are there for each other, bearing each other's burdens without being asked. They are sacrificing their own time and preferences to support their friend when in need. So let's keep in mind what we have learned and look for lessons in the story of this inner circle of friends. Pooh, Piglet, and Eeyore. It occurred to Pooh and Piglet that they hadn't heard from Eeyore for several days. So they put on their hats and coats and trotted across the 100-acre wood to Eeyore's stick house. Inside the house was Eeyore. "Hello, Eeyore," said Pooh. "Hello, Eeyore," said Piglet. "Hello, Pooh." "Hello, Piglet," said Eeyore, in a glum-sounding voice. "We just thought we'd check in on you," said Piglet, "because we haven't heard from you, and so we wanted to know if you were okay." Eeyore was silent for a moment. "Am I okay?" he asked, eventually. "Well, I don't know, to be honest. Are any of us really okay? That's what I ask myself. All I can tell you, Pooh and Piglet, is right now I feel rather sad and alone and not much fun to be around at all. Which is why I haven't bothered you, because you wouldn't want to waste your time hanging out with someone who is sad and alone and not much fun to be around at all, would you now?" Pooh looked at Piglet, and Piglet looked at Pooh, and they both sat down, one on either side of Eeyore in his stick house. Eeyore looked at them in surprise. "What are you doing?" "We're sitting here with you," said Pooh, "because we are your friends. And true friends don't care if someone is feeling sad or alone or not much fun to be around at all. True friends are there for you anyway, and so here we are." "Oh," said Eeyore. "Oh." And the three of them sat there in silence. And while Pooh and Piglet said nothing at all, somehow, almost imperceptibly, Eeyore started to feel a very tiny little bit better because Pooh and Piglet were there. No more, no less.